Hey everyone, here's a quick heads up. The Agile Online Summit is coming soon. You can get all the details at bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. Yes, it's all lowercase, all one word. That's bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. Stick with us till the end of the episode to know the dates, the tracks, and some surprises we have ready for you. But for now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week, one more bonus episode of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And for this bonus episode, we have Rebecca Homkes joining us. Hey, Rebecca. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Rebecca is the author of the book Survive, Reset, Thrive, Leading Breakthrough Growth Strategy in Volatile Times. And I know that all of you listening will find this very interesting. I'm eager to dive into the insights and the lessons that Rebecca shares in her book. But let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a strategy expert advising CEOs and serving as a lecturer at the London Business Schools, one of the cities she lives at. I won't tell you the other ones. I mean, she can decide to, but definitely very cool cities, all of them, with roles at Duke, BCG University, and as a London School of Economics Fellow. She's a keynote speaker at YPO and YPO faculty director, leading fintech accelerators and sitting on company boards. She holds a doctorate from LSE, London School of Economics, and resides in Miami, San Francisco, and London. This was in the bio, so I did tell you.
Yes.
I am so jealous. What cities to live in, Rebecca? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's my delight to be here.
So I really like the topic of your book because uncertainty is, let's call it, a currency for us who work in agile environments. And one of those sources of uncertainty and sometimes even trigger of uncertainty is, of course, change, right? Change is something we work with all the time here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. Every Wednesday, we talk about change as a process, as something we go through as individuals as well as teams and organizations. So based on your insights into reframing our natural responses to uncertainty, how can our leaders, the leaders in our industry, guide their teams to view change as an opportunity for growth rather than a setback, Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, thank you for the question, because this was one of the big premises behind, writing this book and why we should put something else out there is that if you listen carefully in our conversation now outside of your Agile community, of course, who is this part of our day-to-day discourse, if you listen to our conversation about change and uncertainty, when we're speaking to each other about uncertainty, we almost always put a word before it that means it's going to be bad. We ask each other as leaders, how are we going to manage uncertainty? How are we going to overcome uncertainty? How are we going to get through uncertainty? Or the worst, let's just wait until this uncertainty passes, right? And we always set it up as this negative thing. We are framing ourselves from that first point of conversation, this is bad. So I like to start by defining it. The definition of uncertainty is a series of future events which may or may not occur. Whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up. So if you look at that definition, there's power in saying it is a series of future events which may or may not occur. Whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up. Our job as team leaders is that. Figure out what we're trying to achieve and then set ourselves up to do well in whatever that environment shows us. And we need to stop making change this thing that is so big, so paramount, such, even the word change management. When we added the word management to it, we made it bigger, more daunting, and more nasty than it needs to be, right? If we just kind of put it in as this is just our day-to-day, uncertainty is the new certainty, let's grab that and get great at it and look at both the upsides of it as well as the downsides. So that's a lot of what I was trying to do in the book, was make it practical, because we all like the sexy notion of seize the upside of turbulence, but how do you actually do it? And that's what we're trying to do, is provide this step-by-step playbook.
And we'll go into that in a second, but let me take you up on this idea that change is just a sequence of events that we may or may not be able to foretell, and therefore may or may not be happening in the end. And one of the things that we very often talk about here is that there's this constant let's call it dialect, right? Like this yin and yang contrast between planning and uncertainty. We use planning to kind of remove uncertainty from something we are about to do. But of course, as we all agilists know, in fact, sometimes the more we plan, the more uncertainty we build into what we're doing, because the world doesn't necessarily respond to what we do to it in the way we predict. So how do you help the people you work with, CEOs, leaders all over the world? How do you help them acknowledge, not just understand the words that you just shared with us, but acknowledge what that means for them in practice, that the events may or may not occur?
Absolutely. The external world doesn't respect how detailed our plan is, right? It's still going to keep changing and moving around us. And language matters. Your community knows that language matters. So I'm going as far as to say, let's not call the strategic plan anymore. Let's not call the strategic planning process. Let's remove the word plan from strategy. Now, plan is not a nasty word. We're not throwing planning away. There's parts of everyone's organization that still need plans in place. Safety is a good example, right? Some operational aspects, but strategy is not a place for it because the word plan frames our brains. This must happen. Everything in this must get done. And then we see change as a risk that we must manage away and counter to, rather than looking at information that's coming in as possible learning vehicles. So if you're going to say, let's remove something, you've got to give something in its place. And that's the word preparation. And so it's acknowledged that in many parts of our strategy, we need to switch from planning to preparing. Planning is great when the past is a good indicator of the future, when you and I can build a linear model that's going to tell us what happens next. When that's not the case, shift to preparation mode. We've got to make decisions based on our beliefs. We're acknowledging the variables are still going to be emerging. So we're optimizing for robustness, not just efficiency. So we're saying we're still going to be putting things in place, right? To go forward and to grow. We're not just saying, let's wing it as we go. And I think sometimes when people say, oh, let's be agile and let's stop planning, they assume chaos will rail, right? No, we're going into preparation mode. I'm building capability to take advantage of things might come on both the upside and the downside. So it's a real power move to shift into that preparation mode versus planning.
I really like how you say building capability to take advantage of what is not predictable, right? Very close to what one would call options thinking, right? Like instead of thinking, let's do this and then that and so on as a sequence, we say, hey, this and that could happen. Let's be ready to take advantage in case they do happen.
And in preparation mode, you're building capability, but critically, you are acting on beliefs, not facts. Now, that is scary. That is scary for database organizations, but we're not saying you're throwing facts and data away. Everyone in your community knows the criticality of those, but we're actually triangulating in based on those. And then as we're executing, we are stress testing our beliefs and constantly bringing that new information to adjust and adapt our plans, because those are the real things that make a difference. We romanticize these big, sexy pivots that organizations make when they're facing uncertainty. The most powerful changes are small, micro changes, micro adjustments, because we're bringing in new learning and adjusting along the way. And that's what executing in preparation mode allows you to do.
Okay, there's so many topics in those phrases that I could pick on and kind of explore further. I'll pick one first. We work on beliefs, not facts. Let's translate this for our audience, who, of course, needs to help leaders kind of understand this and actually take action. What does this mean in practice, Rebecca?
Great. So when I see teams misaligned on choices or actions, it's almost always because they didn't take the time to align on beliefs. Now, beliefs are not religious dogmas, right? But beliefs are saying, how do we see things going? How quickly is AI going to impact the nature of our industry's competition? Where do we see these economic variables going? How quickly or not will kind of vendors or partners change? So if you think about big things like supply chain, economic uncertainty from elections, inflation, interest rates, but also internal, employees and shifts, you say, this is the trend. But the trap most companies fall into, Vesco, is they spend hours and hours talking about trends, and then they move on. So their final strategy deck has 50 slides of trends and scenarios, but not actually an articulation of their belief going forward. And what sets high-performing companies apart is they say, these are the trends, but more critically, here's our beliefs. And some of these beliefs you're going to get wrong. And that's okay, because as soon as you set a belief, I can now make choices based on it. And how quickly or not things move is a great thing you need to make beliefs about. Now, in a belief, you want to be specific enough you can test it, but not so precise you're trying to predict, because we can't predict the future. And then what these organizations do is it's parallel pathing, right? And so I'm executing my priorities while I'm testing my beliefs, and I'm bringing in learning about my beliefs and how quickly or not they're moving and integrating them into my execution. And when a belief keeps being affirmed, I resource more. When it's not, I resource less. And this is how we bring agility into strategy, which is our key topic today. Is it's not about making big, bold bets based on beliefs. You are resourcing incrementally as you learn and as you affirm your beliefs. But it also means you got to have the power and the lack of ego to say, we got these couple of beliefs wrong. Therefore, we are going to deprioritize this strategic priority and add something else into its place.
Wow, that would be like 2 or 3 episodes right there, just on that part of your presentation. So I do want to dive deeper into a topic, and I'll jump into it right away, which is this idea that you brought to us, which is incremental decision making based on beliefs that are constantly being tested. And this brings up to me one thing that is really dear to my heart, which is this perspective of experimentation. We don't know what the future holds, but we can certainly write down what we think it does and then test it, right? Like understand, is the future really moving in the direction we expected it to move? Now, I'm sure you've gotten a lot of pushback and skeptical comments from the people you consult and advise. So how do you help us, and that's really my thinking, to bring that experimentation mindset to our leaders and present it as something positive that they can take advantage of?
So I cannot be clearer on this point. Companies that learn faster grow faster. It is as simple and as true and as powerful as that. Learn faster, grow faster. And one of the things that I've seen, and I've been watching this for decades, is we tend to, in organizations, apply the wrong lessons from big tech companies, right? So you read that a big tech company doesn't have meetings. Great, I'm going to cancel all of my meetings. You read that a big tech company celebrates failure. Cool, we're going to celebrate failure. What we're not pulling the lesson is the discipline. And discipline is a big word in this that they built that allowed them to get to that outcome. And experimentation is one of those. I am passionately obsessed with the topic of experimentation and learning, hopefully a healthy obsession. And one thing we've got to do is just define it. We have equated it with failure. And I don't know where this started or how it started, but we've got to stop it, right? The definition of learning is not failure, right? And as soon as you reframe that it's all about experimentation, the testing of individual business assumptions that, if true, will impact the profitability of a company. You can define it slightly differently for public organizations, but experimentation is testing of business assumptions that, if true, will impact the profitability of the company. And if you reframe it to that definition, you can see, well, it's all about breaking down individual assumptions and testing them all as quickly and cheaply as possible. And part of what we have done, and I think the Agile community could really learn, right, if they help kind of talk their leaders back in this and explain, is that we have made the word experimentation, equated with failure, as we just said. But I think almost just as bad, Vasco, we've made experimentation the same as a pilot. Let's just ban the word pilots as well inside organizations, because so much of where we equate failure and experimentation is pilots that have gone wrong. A pilot should never run until every single assumption in that pilot has been vetted and tested. And that's the discipline that we're trying to do. So you take an idea, and instead of asking each other, is this a good idea? We ask each other a different and nuanced question. We ask each other, what would have to be true for this to be a great idea? And as a team, you get out a flip chart and you say, let's write down all the variables internally and externally, that if these variables are true, this would be a great idea. We go through each one and we say, is this true or can we make it true? And the ones that we don't know, we test. And the ones that we have to test, we break down into an individual assumption. And you're trying to root out, Vasco, what I call the root variable or the root assumption. And it's very similar to the root cause in lean manufacturing or lean management. What is that variable that is this variable is not true? The rest of this business model blows up. And that discipline is actually something you've got to build with your team. Like, we don't know it naturally. And if you focus on doing that, right? So instead of making big, sexy Friday afternoon failure awards, stop doing that. Right? Instead, say, let's build the discipline of teasing on individual assumptions, ranking them by level of criticality, and then testing them quickly and cheaply. Now, that's a lot. Simpler, what I like to say to CEOs who are struggling with this concept is I would just say, if you had 2 weeks and $2,000, what would you do? And every time they kind of pause and then they say, oh, I would just do this. Like, well, then let's let your team do that, right? And so sometimes you just got to make it that simple. If you had 2 weeks and $2,000, what would you do? But going back to the first one, reframe experimentation, build the discipline of breaking them down into one assumption at a time, identify your root variables, and then test them as quickly and cheaply as possible. So what are we trying to do inside organizations? Not celebrate failure better, but build the capability of teasing out individual assumptions.
And those assumptions are the ones driving our decisions. And it's really important that we are able to verbalize them. And when I say this, I am completely mindful of how easy it is to actually just put a plan in place and completely forget about the assumptions that led us to even create that plan in the first place.
Absolutely. And the premature worry about ROI is a big reason that stops us from doing this, right? Is that we put ROI measures on every new project, every new idea so early in the growth strategy process that we either tease some things to make it look better than it really is, or we kill a bunch of things. So, CFOs have a big role to play in this as well, or anyone from your financial team. Is their role is to help the Agile team reduce uncertainty of the project pipeline, not increase ROI. And if you can work with your financial lead or whoever is your financial business partner to say, instead of trying to increase ROI of a few things, right? Let's take a couple and try to reduce uncertainty, which comes into that, Vasco. Identify the assumption, test them quickly and cheaply. You are empowering your finance team to get involved as a partner rather than a blocker. You are bringing in their knowledge that they probably have from different departments and units and functions, and you are now working together as a team and making that switch. Again, these two big switches, going from is this a good idea to what would have to be true for this to be a great idea, and going from prioritizing by ROI to prioritizing by uncertainty, and then working with your financial partners to reduce uncertainty of the pipeline. This has dramatically increased the speed of experimentation, which increases the speed of learning, which increases the speed of growth.
And also, if we couple that with that phrase that you just said, right? If you had only 2 weeks and $2,000, what would you do? Because we do need to make this very concrete. And I really like that phrase and that question that you just gave us, because I think that's a great tool for us to take and adapt to the work that we do when coaching these leaders.
I want to say that I think this is going to get harder, and it's getting harder because of LLMs. So LLMs are powerful. They're going to change industries. There's so much we can do with them and we should be doing. But because we have big data, I'm actually seeing organizations delay decisions longer because they want the data. They want to do the research. They're afraid that there's all of this magical data out there that now they're learning exists that they just need to wait for. Now, let's remind ourselves, LLMs are by definition based on historical data. That's how we have built them, and that's how we have trained them. They can predict, but they're going to be predictions like everything else, which are going to be wrong. So don't let more and more big data around us stop your team from building this capability and moving when you have enough insights to move.
And on the topic of predictability, of course, we know that agile teams and organizations thrive on adaptability. But you talk about a specific type of predictability. You call it internal predictability. Can you share what you mean by that, Rebecca?
Of course. And I know it's not a sexy phrase, but I'm an economist by trade, so I call things what they are, okay? So here's the thing. So I, again, have been obsessed with this topic for a very long time. And so one thing I did years ago was read every single article out there on how do teams and organizations adapt better to external change. And the advice is pretty uniformly be outside in, which is true, but incomplete. If you actually work with dozens, now hundreds and hundreds of these organizations, which I've been lucky enough to do over the past 15 years, you realize there's a more powerful lesson, and that's internal, is that organizations that are great at adapting to external change have built something called internal predictability. And what that means is we're acknowledging we can't predict the future, nor are we going to try, but we can get better than anyone else at adapting quickly when the world around us changes. And you build this capability, and that capability comes when everyone on your team can say yes to 4 points. Okay, and here's the 4 points. Can everyone on your team say, I know what we're trying to achieve and why it matters? I know who's responsible for making what decisions. I can rely on others to do what they say they will do. And when I do adapt, it's recognized and rewarded. Now, internal predictability is, of course, powerful at the organization level, but I've encouraged all of your listeners, you can build this with a team and you will notice the difference. If I polled your team right now, would everyone say, I know what we're trying to achieve and why it matters? And the why is critical, as everyone in Agile knows, because if you just know what we're trying to do, but not the why, I can't make decisions. And all of this comes down to decision-making speed. But I put a word before speed, Vasco. I call it aligned speed, because alignment without speed is too slow to matter in this world. Speed without alignment is chaos. All of this is about aligned speed. And if you can do that at scale within your team, across teams, across functional teams, the whole organization, that's when you start to see the difference. So those four things build internal predictability. The second, decision-making speed. So much of Agile is about making better, faster decisions. And we sometimes overcomplicate what it takes to do so. But one of the things I found is it just comes down to codifying decision-making rights. Where do decisions take place? Now, you as an individual might want things more decentralized, but what you need the most is clarity, not ownership, knowing exactly where it lives. That way, when you face a decision, you can route it to the right individual. And third, one of the hidden traps of internal predictability, therefore adaptability, is reliability. Is that especially cross-functional and cross-team commitments have less teeth than within team commitments, which means if you're relying on a commitment from a different unit, department, or team, you don't have full reliability. I've done the work on this over several years with colleagues. And what happens when you don't have reliability is you do lots of dysfunctional things. You compensate, you duplicate, you escalate. And the amount of time people spend inside organizations following up on stuff, chasing stuff, compensating is all value destroying time, right? And so if you build this high reliability, you can move faster because Vasco, reliability gives you adaptability. And then finally, it links back to learning experimentation. When team members do adapt, but stay within the set boundaries, are they recognized and rewarded? How many organizations in their town halls and their employee shouts out and their weekly roundups, the weekly huddle, we recognize who hit their numbers, who worked hard. How often do we recognize who changed something, who stopped doing something, who learned something which benefited everyone else? We've got to think about how we use these small, and the team huddle is the best place to do it, right? Watch who you're talking about. Yes, the employees who work hard should be celebrated, but more critically, if we want to build agile teams, we need to be calling out the team members who did that. They adapted within the bounds of strategy, even if it meant changing something that we were doing.
There's so much to go on there, but I do want to move forward because you talked about the concept of in-team commitment versus a cross-team commitment and how that changes. And the structure and organization of teams is a topic we've discussed so much in the Agile community. There's a whole book about that called Team Topologies, great book. The episodes are linked in the show notes if you want to go and listen to the interview with the authors. But you talk about something called context for cohesive Agile teams. So you mentioned that shared context, not more communication, which is what many of us are trying to do, right? To increase the bandwidth, have more shared information rather than shared context. And you say that shared context is the key to cohesive teams. So how can we work towards building that shared context within the team, but also, of course, because, software is eating the world, as they say, we have very large organizations working on software. So we need to create shared context within a team, but also across teams in a cross-functional setting.
Absolutely. Communication does not equal understanding. Again, communication does not equal understanding. And we sometimes kid ourselves that if we communicate more, we have built this understanding. But it comes from talking, not telling. But at its basis, simplicity is we, as we're facing more and more complex worlds, are often reluctant to have simple messages for the organization because we're afraid we're missing something or we haven't captured all the options. But complexity is a really crap weapon against complexity. The only good weapon we have against complexity is simplicity. If for no other reason than this, messages that are complex are super hard to understand, and things that are hard to understand are hard to remember, and things that aren't remembered aren't done. So the first job of building shared context is getting the complex and intelligent strategy down to something that's simple and still intelligent. And that is actually difficult because it takes time. You've got to make the strategy not stupid and simple, but intelligent and simple. So keep the insights and the essence. That's job one. And then shared context is about what matters, why it matters, how things fit together, and how we're doing. What matters? What are we trying to achieve? Why does it matter? How does it link to how we create value? How does stuff fit together? And think about all the messages that go out to your team. We just hired a new team member in this region. We're working on this product. We just onboarded this new customer. We send messages out and don't tie them back to the strategy. This leads to a lot of confusion. Every single email to the team should go through a filter of how does this reinforce our shared context? And if you can't place it, why are we sending it out? It's just going to breed confusion. And one of the most critical ways to build shared context is constantly going back and saying, this is how we're doing and how we're not doing. And sometimes when things aren't working, it's the best time to talk about it and really start building shared context of what matters and does. Now, the hardest thing about building shared context is you can never check it off the list as done. We as leaders love checklists. We love finishing the day with something crossed off as done and completed. And this one never will be. It will always, always be an open item on your to-do list that you still need to do. And our being so uncomfortable with open items that we can't cross off is really hurting us from building the capability of building shared context well.
And on that, you also talk about common ways leaders impede or prevent organizational growth. Now, we know that working as Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, and even product owners, we know how hard it is to keep leaders on point about an Agile transformation or digital transformation that might be going on. So what advice do you have for us when it comes to helping leaders who are in the middle of this transformation, which hopefully will help with experimentation and building shared context and aligning teams? How can we help them avoid the common traps and support their teams more effectively in that Agile transformation?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I loved writing all of the chapters of this book, but one of my favorite chapters was I wanted to title it, Why You Won't Do This. And the reason I wanted to call it Why You Won't Do This is that I purposely want this playbook to seem simple, and I want you to just grab it and run with it, whether it's at your team or the organization-wide level. But watching organizations do this, Vasco, they fall into the same traps time and time again. Now, of course, because in publishing, we have to be super positive. The titles now, leadership traps or something, hopelessly American and vague like that. But no, its original title was Why You Won't Do This. And there's a couple main traps, but let's not just talk about the traps, but how team members can work with their leaders to not fall into them. A very common one is I call I've got this. The leader assumes, I've seen this type of uncertainty before. This is the playbook that worked then. So put the same playbook in place again. And we saw this fail dramatically in 2020 when a lot of leaders put in their '09 recession playbook facing 2020 and didn't get any of the upside that changing world gave them. So on the I got this, you want to take a pause and say, let's go back to our beliefs. Have we changed our beliefs? How do our beliefs go? So go back to the beliefs, spend the couple of minutes to the couple of hours aligning as a team with your bosses and leaders. What are our top beliefs that lead to these choices? And the beliefs that we don't know, right? Then we need to think about resourcing those and keep constantly testing them. That's a big one. Another big one, and I'm sure many of your leaders have found this, is I call it false air cover. Is what happens is the leaders will say to people like me, we would love, to work on the strategy, Rebecca. You just don't understand how slammed my team is right now. They've got so much going on. There's so much. They just don't have time to reset the strategy. They just don't have the time. And I call this false air cover because when you actually talk to these leaders, I rarely find a situation where they say that that's true. They are usually begging to have these strategy conversations so they can reset what they're working on and they can give the assurance to their team they're working on things that are aligned with how the world has changed. So you've got to let your team members, your leadership know we have the time because this is important, and you have to feed that up so you don't get this false air cover. That's another big one. And the other one is just really thinking about putting on an organization-wide hat when you're in these discussions. So this gets hard because we always want to represent our product or our business unit or our team. But when we do that as leaders, then the leadership above us doesn't often think that we can contribute to strategy conversations. And so they make them more and more smaller groups and more inward. So I'd really encourage people, you need to understand not just your piece of the puzzle, but how it fits with the wider organization goals. And therefore, if you can contribute to these strategy insightful conversations, then we will have more of them going forward.
And there's so much to talk about how that is important for teams that we want to be aligned and have shared context. And what is more important in the shared context than understanding the strategy, right? Which is ultimately the why of all of the other decisions that we are making throughout the organization. Now, in the book, you also talk about some real life case studies from companies like Spotify and Dell who have embraced aspects of agile and lean methodologies. Definitely the Spotify model is all the rage, or was at least in the agile community. What are some of the key lessons you think software leaders can take away to apply in their own teams on how to enable agility, that shared context, that speed of decision making, and the experimentation mindset?
Yeah, well, we can actually borrow an acronym right from one of the final chapters of the book, which will hopefully be, motivating for your listeners. And that's the notion of BLAST. BLAST came from trying to codify exactly that. How can organizations, companies, or teams really exhibit these characteristics of a high growth organization? Because in trying to study what high performing companies looked like, I was constantly let down by guidance that was just kind of vague and mindless. They have great cultures, great teams, great strategy, great execution. Like, what does that even mean, right? Because, lots of companies would claim that they have that. So I went deeper and deeper and just embedded with these teams. And I said, well, actually, there's 5 elements that set these apart. They act on beliefs, not facts. They learn faster than others. They have agility in decision-making, shared context, and trust. And we've talked about many of these elements. So first, make a belief tracker, not just a strategy tracker. Now, belief trackers are super powerful, and here's why. Your belief tracker should sometimes be off track. If you've got a belief tracker and it's all green, I don't think your team is magically better predictors. I think your team wasn't clear enough on your beliefs to actually be learning. So track your beliefs, not just your actions. Second, learn faster. And one of the things you've got to do is define, what does an experiment mean in our team? So a good experiment, for instance, breaks down one variable at a time, takes less than 2 weeks to learn, is capped at the amount of money that it can spend, and lives very firmly within the organization's cultural boundaries. We sometimes lament why our team is not experimenting more, but we haven't done the job as their leader of defining what an experiment is. Now, some people's teams might have very low budget. That's okay. You can still learn a lot on almost no budget, but define what an experiment means. Agility decision-making. Think about, what are all the repeatable, critical decisions your team members make? Who owns them? And make sure that they know. Shared context, again, that common understanding of what matters and why it matters and how it fits together. And then trust. How strong is the reliability of commitments across your team and from your team to other teams? Reliability builds adaptability. When reliability is strong, your team can adapt and move faster than others, because mindshare and growth mindset is so powerful in all of this. And growth mindset is another one of those things that's just been so poorly applied, right? Bad lessons applied. And we have hours and hours and hours of boot camps on building growth mindset that are all very high level and touchy-feely and theoretical. It starts from, what percentage of our mind on a day-to-day basis can be focused on value creating things, right? And when you're so busy chasing and duplicating, compensating, that is where your brain is. When I work with organizations where reliability is high, all of the team members' mind share can then be focused on those value creating things they know will move the needle. And that's what they're working on. So those elements of BLAST, you can start building your team. Just do one thing on each of those letters, and you will see a difference within a couple of months.
BLAST, B-L-A-S-T,
yes.
The acronym to check out in the book, Survive, Reset, Thrive, Leading Breakthrough Growth Strategy in Volatile Times. The author is Rebecca Homkes, that's Homkes. That's a Dutch name, I hear.
Yes.
So check it out for sure. I mean, Rebecca, you've talked about so many topics that are dear to our community and of course, very, very topical for us when we do the work of Agile Coach and Scrum Master, working with leaders, helping them to build this kind of organizations. I imagine some people might be even interested in contacting you. So where should they go to know more about you and the work that you're doing, Rebecca?
You absolutely know that your community is very, very dear of heart and mind to me. And people that I talk to as I'm kind of writing this and experimenting with, and several teams have used some of the methodology in this book. So 2 ways to get me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just at my name, Rebecca Homkes. And also the website, surviveresetthrive.com. So that's just the book title, surviveresetthrive.com. You'll get the videos, you'll get podcasts, webinars, and direct links. And please kind of come sign up for the newsletter. And for those who can get a chance, click on the link and buy a copy of the book, and then drop me a note and let me know what you think.
Absolutely. So do check it out, surviveresetthrive.com. And why not send a few follow-up questions to Rebecca via LinkedIn? I'm sure she would be happy and thrilled to engage.
I absolutely love it. Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
All right, Rebecca, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
Hi there, Agile friends. Thank you for sticking around. So, as I was saying at the beginning of the show, on October 22nd this year, we will have the first day of the Agile Online Summit 2024. The summit will take place from October 22nd to 24th, so make sure you book your calendars, as there will be loads of sessions for you to attend, including live QAs with the speakers, networking sessions, and more. This year, we're also organizing regular networking events online so that you get to talk and meet your peers before the summit even starts. So if you want to know more, check them out at bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. That's all one word, all lowercase. That's bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. You can sign up for a free ticket and get notified when those warm-up events will be organized, so stay tuned. Now, regarding the summit, our opening keynote will be Marshall Goldsmith's exposition of a project he's been working on for a while. That's marshallgoldsmith.ai. And Marshall is an author and also a leadership coach who sold over 3 million books worldwide and has been considered twice #1 leadership thinker in the world by Thinker 50. And you definitely don't want to miss that. If you want to know more about the tracks, here they are. We will have 4 tracks. The first track is Shift from Product to People. In this track, we will explore what we call the third wave of Agile adoption, exploring psychological safety, coaching techniques, and more to unlock your team's potential. In this track, you can learn to foster trust, encourage innovation, and build high-performing teams. Transform your approach and the future of Agile to be much more people-centric. The second track we have for you is value-centric product development. In this track, we will learn how to master product management and ownership by focusing on value. We will learn to identify, validate, and deliver what customers truly need, and dive into customer-centric approaches, experimentation techniques, and continuous market validation ideas. We have to accept that if Agile is to succeed, we have to become value-centric, and that's what we explore in this track. The next track is titled Agile Coaching Masterclass. We want to help take your coaching to the next level and transform team performance. Develop key Agile coaching skills, emphasizing people-centric and value-centric approaches in line with the previous tracks. And we will help you learn how to guide teams towards value focus and effectiveness. In this track, we want to help you unlock the potential of the individuals and the organizations you will be working with. After all, the future of Agile is coaching-centric. And finally, the last track, and definitely not the least, is all about the future of Agile. Explore the trends shaping Agile's evolution. The previous 3 tracks do that as well. Discover real-world success stories from innovative companies pushing the boundaries of what's possible today, and learn how practitioners are evolving Agile practices, gain insights in how to revolutionize your own approach. After all, the future of Agile is here, so let's explore it. You will also have the opportunity to network with your peers, so get your ticket and join our Slack at bit.ly/Agile Online Summit. That's all lowercase, all one word, bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. As always, we have free tickets and the VIP tickets, so check them out. It will all be available at bit.ly/Agile Online Summit 24. I'll see you on the conference floor.